In 1954, a quiet town in Eastern Europe was gripped by an icy silence. Young girls were vanishing in broad daylight, leaving no trace, as if the earth itself had opened up to swallow them whole. Families locked their doors, terrified of an invisible predator, a monster they believed was haunting the shadows. But the truth was far more sinister. Death didn't wear a mask, and it didn't hide in the woods. It wore a skirt, an elegant trench coat, and a warm smile that concealed an abyss of cruelty. Welcome to the abyss. This is the well of monsters. To understand how such a predator is born, we must look into her past. Piroska Yencho was born into a world of strict rules and socialist order. Her father was a respected police officer, a man of the law tasked with keeping the peace. At home, Piroska was the quiet daughter, living in her father's shadow. Her family appeared exemplary to the neighbors. But beneath the surface of this perfect household, a fracture was forming. While other girls her age were dreaming of the future, Piroska was obsessed with the present and the absolute power she could exert over it. Psychologists who later studied her case noted a disturbing emotional void. She wasn't interested in dolls or childhood friendships. Instead, she spent hours observing the power her father held over the town, the way people feared the uniform, the way a single word from him could change a person's fate. She didn't want to be a part of society, she wanted to be its judge. She was seeking something more intense. A power that only the line between life and death can provide. As she reached her teenage years, this fascination turned into a dark ritual. She began to wander the streets in a long, gray trench coat, a garment that became her armor. To the world, she was just a shy girl. To herself, she was a ghost in plain sight, a predator learning to hunt in the very streets her father was supposed to protect. It all began on a mundane summer afternoon in 1954, the kind of afternoon where the heat hangs heavy over the cobblestones and the town seems to hold its breath. Her first victim was a girl of only 13, a child whose name should have been a future but instead became a dark footnote in history. Piroska didn't use brute force. She didn't need it. She used the one weapon her father's reputation had gifted her, absolute trust. She approached the girl with a soft, melodic voice, the kind of voice a big sister uses. In her hand, she held a small, innocent-looking gift, a colorful, silk scarf. She told the girl she had more treasures to show her, promising a world of secrets that only girls could share, away from the prying eyes of adults. With a shy smile, Piroska lured her into a secluded, dimly lit house. The child walked in, feeling safe in the company of the policeman's daughter. Inside that room, the air grew cold. The light from the dusty window caught the edges of Piroska's gray trench coat, and in an instant, her mask didn't just slip, it dissolved. Her eyes, once vacant and shy, became twin mirrors of a terrifying, newfound hunger. Without a moment of hesitation, without a single word of warning, Piroska wrapped the colorful scarf, the very gift she had promised, around the girl's neck. The struggle was brief but desperate. Small hands clawed at the air, then at Piroska's sleeves, but the grip of the girl in the trench coat was like iron. She watched. She didn't look away. She stared deep into the girl's eyes, watching the light fade, watching the precise moment the soul left the body. When the last breath finally flickered out and the room returned to a deafening silence, Piroska didn't feel horror. She didn't feel the crushing weight of remorse. Instead, she felt a divine euphoria. A rush of adrenaline and power so intoxicating it felt like a religious experience. She stood over the body, adjusting her coat, feeling for the first time in her life that she was truly awake. The girl in the trench coat had found her calling. The monster was no longer dormant. The evil had been unleashed. After that first taste of life slipping through her fingers, Piroska's thirst didn't just grow, it became an all-consuming hunger. The girl in the trench coat was no longer a shy daughter, she was a predator in full bloom. Within just a few months, at least 5 young girls would vanish into the gray mists of Toro-Xentmiclash. Her method was terrifyingly consistent, the deception of innocence. She used her image as the good girl, the policeman's daughter, like a master key to open every door. She didn't hunt in the dark alleys, she hunted in broad daylight under the very nose of the law. She would approach a child, adjust her scarf and offer a smile so convincing that even the most cautious parent wouldn't have looked twice. But Piroska wasn't interested in money. She didn't want their purses or their bikes. She stole memories. After each struggle, after the silence returned to the room, she began a ritual that revealed the true depth of her depravity. She would take a pair of scissors and carefully cut pieces of fabric from the victim's clothing. A scrap of a floral dress. A ribbon from a braid. A cheap plastic ring. She took these items home, to the house of a police officer, and hid them under the floorboards of her bedroom. At night, while the town outside was paralyzed by a fear so thick you could breathe it, Piroska would sit in the dark, running her fingers over her trophies. She was building a museum of stolen lives right beneath her father's feet. The town was on the brink of a total breakdown. Vigilante groups roamed the streets. Parents kept their children locked indoors, trembling at every knock on the door. They were looking for a monster, a man with scarred hands and a twisted face. They never once suspected the 20-year-old girl who waved politely to her neighbors every morning, her hands tucked neatly into the pockets of her gray trench coat, perhaps still clutching a scrap of silk from the girl who disappeared the day before. She wasn't just killing, she was playing a game with the entire world. And for a long time, the girl in the trench coat was the only one who knew the score. But even the most meticulous monsters eventually leave a trail in the blood-soaked dust. In early 1955, Piroska made a crucial error. She targeted the daughter of a high-ranking local official, a child of the elite. This disappearance triggered a hunt that the town's silent fear could no longer contain. For the first time, a witness emerged, a neighbor who had seen a flash of a gray trench coat near the area where the girl was last seen. The investigators, many of whom were her own father's closest colleagues, began to narrow the circle. They didn't want to believe it. They looked for excuses, for other suspects, for anyone but the quiet girl who brought her father lunch at the station. But the evidence was a cold, hard wall they could no longer climb over. First, they went to her room. As they pried up the floorboards, they found her collection of trophies, scraps of fabric and jewelry from the missing girls. But the biggest question remained: where were the bodies? The investigators moved to the backyard, to an old, overgrown stone well. It looked abandoned, a relic of the past. But as they lowered a lantern into the black void, the light hit something that stopped the heart of the nation. At the bottom, discarded like unwanted trash, lay the remains of the missing girls. Piroska hadn't just killed them, she had turned the family well into a mass grave. She had been living her life, eating dinner with her police officer father, while only a few yards away, her victims were rotting in the dark. She had used the well to swallow her crimes, believing that the deep water would keep her secrets forever. But the well finally spoke. When the trial began, the public expected a monster who would weep or beg for mercy. Instead, they got a statue. Piroska sat in the courtroom with a stone-cold indifference that terrified even the most seasoned judges. She didn't deny a single thing. When asked why she did it, she didn't talk about trauma or rage. She described the strangulations with the same flat, bored emotion one would use to read a grocery list. She wasn't a victim of society. She was a master of it. She had looked at the law her father represented and decided it simply didn't apply to her. She was the judge, the jury, and the executioner, and in her mind, she had won the game. On a cold, gray morning in 1955, at just 21 years old, Piroska Yencho was led to the gallows. She walked to her death with the same terrifying composure she had shown throughout her trial, no tears, no last-minute pleas for a soul she didn't believe she had. As the trapdoor swung open, the life of the girl in the trench coat was extinguished. But for the Hungarian government, her death was only the beginning. In a socialist society that claimed to be perfect, a society that boasted it had eliminated the roots of crime and deviance, a monster like Piroska wasn't just a murderer, she was an ideological failure. The orders came from the top: erase her. Her story was classified, her trial records were moved to the darkest corners of the state archives, and the press was silenced. For decades, the name Piroska Yencho was a ghost, whispered only by those who had lived through the terror. The government wanted the world to believe that monsters only existed in the decadent West. They wanted to bury the truth as deep as the victims in that backyard well. But secrets of this magnitude have a way of seeping through the cracks. The memory of the girl in the trench coat serves as a chilling, timeless warning. It shatters the myth that we can spot evil by its face or its background. Piroska wasn't a product of a broken home or a life of crime, she was the daughter of the law. She was the girl you trust with your secrets, the one who lived in the house with the white picket fence. Sometimes, the most dangerous predator isn't the one under your bed, or the one lurking in a dark alleyway, it's the one standing right next to you at the bus stop. The one who smiles at you in the hallway. The one whose father protects the very streets where the shadows grow longest. Perhaps the most chilling part of Piroska's story isn't just what she did, but where she did it. She was committing these atrocities in the home of a man sworn to stop people exactly like her. Her father wasn't just a witness, he was her unwitting shield. How does a trained police officer, an expert in spotting deception, live under the same roof as a serial killer and see nothing? The smell of decay from the well, the strange floorboards in his daughter's room, the missing girls whose photos were likely pinned to the corkboard at his own station. Investigators later faced a wall of silence. Was he blinded by a father's desperate love, or was he a victim of his own arrogance, believing that his perfect upbringing had made his daughter immune to evil? Piroska played him like a master. She would bring him lunch at the precinct, smiling at his colleagues, while her pockets were heavy with the jewelry of the girls they were searching for. She used his authority as her ultimate camouflage. Every time her father patrolled the streets looking for a brutal man in the shadows, he was leaving the real monster at home, safe and sound, tucked away in her room with her trophies. In the end, he didn't just lose his career, he lost his soul. He had to face the reality that while he was hunting for justice, he was feeding and protecting the very evil he had sworn to destroy. This is the story of Piroska Yencho, a girl who lived a double life in the heart of the law. But before you turn off the lights, I have to ask you, do you think her father's position as a policeman was the only reason she got away with it for so long, or was she truly a psychological genius? Leave your theory in the comments. Subscribe to Well of Monsters if you have the courage to keep digging. Hit the bell so you never miss a descent into the dark. Stay vigilant. Stay curious. And remember, see you at the bottom of the well.